So we're still trying to find Bargle. Hello and welcome to the Battle in Barrow and another D&D gameplay overview video. Just a quick notice, I've decided not to record them anymore because that was sort of interfering with how we play the game and whatnot, and it's sort of interrupting the flow of how we play the game. I wasn't enjoying it as much, and plus I felt it was detrimental to these videos as you're only getting sort of footage of the gameplay rather than sort of proper pictures and so forth. So I thought I'd go back to how I started making them. So yes, let's get on with the story. So we are picking up where we left off last time. We are sort of halfway through the complex. We've just discovered a secret door that we've barged through and dispatched a goblin guard. They've dragged the chest through with them and they're going to leave it here with them. We decided to have a short rest here so they can regain some hit points using hit die, and the magic user Witchy Poo, she can use her arcane recovery ability to recover some spell slots. If you haven't played 5e before, you have long rests and short rests, but as a DM I have sort of house rule that you can't long rest in a dungeon, because to me that doesn't make sense really. You're not going to get a good rest when you're pretty much not resting properly. You can't really rest in a dungeon when it could be wandering monsters, especially something like here. I mean, I thought it a bit cheeky here having an hour's rest with goblins around, but I allowed it. We had it, we agreed, thought it makes sense. So they then carry on up, going up a path. So our party venture further into the complex and soon come to a passageway to the right, and this passageway is covered in cobwebs. The rest of the corridor continues into the darkness. Now the ranger, he has a good idea too. He scouts ahead forward just to make sure there's nothing waiting up ahead in the gloom. So he does that, and there isn't anything there. Now this actually scuppered me a bit, because what was going to happen is if they went into the cobweb passage, there was going to be a goblin sentry that was going to sneak back down the corridor and bang on the webs to alert the awaiting spider in the following room. But of course I couldn't do that because they'd already made sure there was nothing waiting. And they scuppered me up a second time, so I was going to have them trip up or knock the spider's web and alert the spider. But they decide they're going to tiptoe in, so I make them do dex checks and they pass with ease. And they sort of enter and look in, and the room's just full of rotten stuff. There's 2 dead goblins in the corner. And it's just covered in spider's web, but they can't see a spider. So they decide just to leave it be. But the ranger, being the ranger, can't leave it be. So as they just about to walk out, he lights a torch and throws it, lights the cobwebs up, thinking to burn them away, which it does, and it burns out quite quickly. But with that, out from the fireplace, safely unhurt from the flames, drops a massive giant spider. They backpedal out a bit, and the spider has a slow move when it's just on ground. It's quite fast in the webs, but so they've burnt the webs away, so they move actually faster than the spider, so they're quite confident. Until get a bit too overconfident and cocky, the spider has a range attack where it can launch out a web. So with this, it ensnares the ranger. Their cleric they have decides to rush forward and engage the spider in hand to hand. It's probably most heavily armoured, so makes sense, and to prevent the spider from rushing into the ranger. The ranger has to take his turn trying to escape the web, which he doesn't. He fails, and a battle ensues with the spider. They do eventually overcome it though. They then carry on up the corridor and they come to a junction just off sort of at an angle, which they go up and they can see it's like an half excavated tunnel, and as they get further into it they can hear the sounds, dim as it were, coming through the walls of excavation sounds happening nearby. They return back and they see a little hole in the wall that they haven't really noticed before. It's not a secret door or anything, it wasn't secret, it's just a thin couple of foot wide hole which they could possibly squeeze through, and I can see it sort of narrows off. They decide not to go through there just yet, but to go up the tunnel. Where at the end of the tunnel, they see a door that is the decorations and door match that from the first encounter. I don't know if you remember the first encounter. I come across a stout door in the U-shaped tunnel. It just leads on to there. But there is another door nearby that leads to a room what appears to be a barracks of some kind. They listen outside and they can hear the sounds of snoring, and then they enter and discover 6 beds with 6 goblins sleeping in them. In this world, what happens next, it might seem slightly immoral, killing things in their sleep, but in this world, goblins are pure evil. They're not misunderstood, they're not nice creatures, they have no humanity in them, they are pure evil. So they decide not to take chances. They know that these goblins are trying to form a stronghold near Threshold, which will be spelled doom for the region, so they actually just kill them in their sleep. So the Magic user Witchy-Poo, she casts Burning Hands, which is a 15-foot arc which covers 4 of the beds from their position, and the Ranger and the Cleric use a range attack using a bow and crossbow. Witchy-Poo, she obliterates her victims in their sleep, but the others, they don't, and they sort of wound the goblins. They do quite poor damage. I think it's like 1 damage apiece. There's 2 goblins with arrows and bolts sticking out of their persons, and they're quite miffed and perplexed by this, and a melee combat ensues, which doesn't last very long. Next up, they come to the other end of the room. There is a door ajar that leads to a much tidier room and less smelly barracks type room, and this is, or was, Bargle's bedroom, his bedchambers where he was staying. He's long gone now. The room looks like it has been ransacked, or more properly put, hurriedly packed away, but there are still some missing items to find. They find the contract between the Bargle and the goblins, saying if the goblins excavate the tunnels so Bargle can search for his book, the Bargle will hand over the complex to the goblins so they can set up a stronghold within the region, confirming what the players already knew. There is also a description of the book that Bargle is looking for, which is nice. After that, they return back to the corridor with the thin hole through the wall and squeeze through. Opens up about halfway through and another junction juts off, but it just instantly leads to a collapsed rubble tunnel. And they get nearer to another opening leading off again to the north, which if they sort of look through and peer through, they can see some goblins and a human on the other side. So they manage to, and the goblins and the humans are quite distracted because they are excavating the other end, and they've just sort of made a breakthrough. They've just sort of excavated enough, so they're cheering, they're happy, saying, well, during this commotion, they sneak in and tap the human on his shoulder, to which he spins round, totally surprised, and jumps out of his skin. He asks him in a very aggressive kind of manner, what the heck are you doing here? To which they reply, and they hold that Bargle had sent them. They're trying to do a bit of blagging here. With this, he kind of misunderstands. He thinks that they've been sent to kill him, effectively. Bargle is not one to be trusted. His usefulness is effectively over, and they've come to kill him, so he gets really upset and defensive. I sort of explain that's not the case, and he can go, so he doesn't leave. He just walks down towards where they entered and just hangs around, sort of muttering curses about Bargle and what have you. So I thought that was quite nice. They managed to handle that without violence. And now to the goblins. Well, they decided there's too many to fight here, and they'll deal with them later, so they sort of dismissed them. At first, goblins are a bit apprehensive, but they hold up the contract as sort of proof of who they are. And then with that, the goblins leave. They further explore the complex, and there is more doors and passageways further up, but there is another one to the side, to the right of them as they're going up. This leads to a room where they listen out the door and they can hear sort of scuttering sounds inside. They open the door and just see it's a storeroom of some kind, an old storeroom. Inside, as their eyes adjust in the gloom, they can see like a giant centipede crawling around the back of the room. They actually managed to defeat this with ranged weapons, which is nice. They sort of peer in, they can see there's nothing of real use, there's no real need to go in there, but they do so anyway. But what they don't know is above them, above the door on the ceiling, was another giant scorpion waiting to pounce on any unsuspecting people who enter, which it does on top of the ranger. He gets it again, he's having a bad time with insects in this game. But they quickly dispatch it. They head further north and listen outside another door. They don't hear anything, and that is because they open the door and inside there are animated skeletons. They're not moving, which is why they didn't hear anything. But as soon as that door enters and their light source penetrates the gloom, they spring to life. The semblance of life that they have. With this, they are in combat with them. We're using a critical role tables from Seth Skorskowski, which are amazing. I highly recommend them for 5e. It makes combat way more interesting. So also skeletons have a damage vulnerability to bludgeoning weapons. So the cleric, who has a warhammer, which is a bludgeoning weapon, he gets a critical roll, and with that it's 58, which is, I believe, max damage. So what that means is the damage vulnerability does double damage anyway, and it's max damage times 2. I think 58 equates to, but anyway, it's a massive amount of damage. So that skeleton literally gets blasted into dust. But there's nothing else in the room. There is, because after a search they do find a secret door which they open up, leading to a stairs that they can see sort of leads out. They haven't found the book yet, so they don't plan to go out just yet, but they will use it as a quicker exit than the one they had, so they don't have to traipse through all the complex again. But as they sort of shine the light in, it disturbs a whole nest of sturges. Now, the ranger has had bad experiences with sturges before, so he has some sort of PTSD against him, so he just quickly slams the door and decides that they are not going that way. Further into the complex, they come to the sort of the final doors they've got to search, and they open the door, and inside is like a wizard's study area. There is shelves and a bench, or a wizard's bench, and a fireplace. 1/4 of the room is sort of collapsed under rubble, and they can see a pair of skeletal legs under it where someone has met a grisly end. But what they also see is a ghost floating around the room. This has a rule where they have to pass a test, saving throw test, which the two important people that would have been useful for this, the ranger and the cleric, fail it, and so they have to run at full speed for 3 turns. The ranger would have been good to turn the undead, the cleric would have been good to turn the undead, and the ranger has, I forget why, but it was quite important we didn't lose the ranger, but we lost him anyway. They're both now running off. The others wait outside the door, and the ghost is patrolling around the room, but it totally ignores them. So they get a bit brave and enter, and even so, now the ghost totally ignores them. It's not a monster as such. It is just the spirit of the poor wizard who's now buried under the rubble. Not Bargle, by the way. It's the wizard who originally owned this complex many centuries ago. The wizard, the cleric and the ranger come to their senses and return to the party, and they search the room. They don't find anything as such in this room, so they enter the door which leads to the wizard's bedroom, and it is here they find the book they are searching for. They identify it from the Bargle's room earlier as a major important book, that if Bargle got his hands on it, it would spell trouble, but the book needs a key that Bargle has, and they can't get into the book without this key. It's magically locked. But they take the book, and decide to bypass the Sturge exit and go all the way back to the beginning. And it is there that they meet the goblins from earlier, and they get with accompanying with more goblins that they've got hold of from the complex they haven't managed to kill yet, and they get waylaid. So once again, they try their best at blagging it, and they succeed, saying they are Bargle, they are employed by Bargle. He wants them to remain here. There is too many of them to fight. Goblins are weak in small numbers, but with great numbers, they're going to overwhelm the party. What they decide to do is inform the Baron back in town about this complex, so the Baron can send some troops to flush out the rest of the goblins, which makes sense. Which they do actually do that. They return into town and they see the Baron, hand over the book to him, because that seems the best point. And oh god, in my true fashion of going back quickly to something I've forgotten about, it also in the wizard's room there is an old spell book that the Witchy Poo can actually look, so she'll study that later on. It will give her some more new spells. At this stage they're also at level 3 as well. In town, they decide to ask about the Black Building from ages ago, and they're told at the town hall, and they're told to visit the Jasper, who is the head of the Wizards Guild in town. Even though the Wizards Guild doesn't yet have a proper building, he is using the town's apothecary as the Wizards Guild. So they go and see him, and Jasper is a cantankerous old wizard. And he speaks really strangely to them. What Jasper is in, sort of in my game term, is he's aware that he's in a role-playing game. He's an old character from way back I took from the Shady Dragon in book, and he's aware of his stats are different. I'm using the exact same stats as what he has in that book. So he has sort of Thaco, descending armor class, and he's well aware of that. So he'll say strange things like, the youth of today, they don't even know what Thaco is. Their armor class ascends instead of descends. And weird things like that confuse the actual players, but make the actual players, confuse the player characters and amuse the players. So yeah, he's going to be something in the future a bit more interesting. He's going to be a regular occurring NPC in my game world. But for now, they ask him about what the Black Building is, and he tells them that it is a rubbish dump. They're confused, so he explains a bit more. Inside the Black Building is just a pit. Again, they're confused. And then he says inside the pit is a black pudding that he charmed and has put there. And the townsfolk, when it's ready, can go up there, chuck their rubbish in, and the black pudding will dispose of it by eating it and consuming it. It's recycling. It's good for the environment. We all need a black pudding rubbish dump, but there'll be more on this later on in our games. But for now, with that, they revisit the Baron, who tells them that Bargle, a sighting of Bargle has been made at Castle Mystara, and would they go and investigate and put an end to the Bargle's evilness. They accept the challenge, and that is where we left it, and that's where I'm going to leave this video. So until the next one, guys, thanks for listening, stay safe, and I'll see you then.